So Corrie's worked in the resource industry for 10 years as a group risk manager for Billiton. And then you founded SafeMap, that we're going to be hearing about today, SafeMap International, back in 1994 in Australia. And the way my notes describe you is one of the leading consultants internationally on new thinking and safety. Now that grabs my attention right here, new. And so, Corrie, welcome to the podium, and please all join me in welcoming him.
Thank you for that. I think this is working. If you can't hear me, just yell out and I'll move to the speaker. I was born and raised in South Africa and lived in Australia for a long period of my life, and then last 10 years in Vancouver. And I used to start my presentations always with an apology for my accent. And I went back to Australia for a visit, and they've assured me I have a perfectly good Vancouver accent now, and that I'm rest assured that you will understand every word that I'm saying. Why safe organizations fail is the topic that I want to share with you today, and have a bit of a look into the future. What is it that happens in organizations that have become so safe that they've actually become victim of what I call delusions? And to have a little bit of a future view, I want to show you what's happening in United States accident rates. And the accident rates, the non-fatal accident rates, have shown a considerable improvement. Up until about 2010, a 64% improvement. After that, 16%. Now that's obviously significant. If we look at fatality rates, the fatality rates in the United States have improved up to 2010 with 32%, now only 2% improvement. And in fact, the last 2014, 2015, the fatality rate is actually increasing. Now, bear in mind, we have never been so safe in our history. We've never been so protected with technology and systems in our history. Why are we finding more people per 1,000 being killed now? The fatality rates are going up. So, why is that? And I want to share with you my view. Something is happening more recent. Last 10 years, I think we are hitting a wall. And if you look at the typical things we do in safety, analyze, prevent accidents, hierarchies of control, safety rules, these things all seem to have hit a limit and is bouncing up against this imaginary wall. Now, what I would like to share with you is what can we be doing about this? Now, a very famous scientist, Albert Einstein, said, the world we have created is a product of our thinking. We cannot be changed without changing our thinking. So I'm hoping to challenge today your thinking in 1 hour or less than an hour, something that is actually of incredible complexity. There's another very famous person that said, I cannot conceive of any condition which would cause a ship to flounder. And modern shipbuilding has gone beyond that. Now, who was this guy? Captain E.J. Smith. And I'm sure you all know who Captain E.J. Smith was. He was the captain of the Titanic. Now, the Titanic took off, and this is very relevant to today. The Titanic took off. It was the safest, most advanced piece of human engineering that ever hit the waters. And in fact, it is claimed that a crew member said to one of the passengers, Mrs. Sylvia Caldwell, not even God can sink this ship. This is how safe it is. And you all know what happened to the ship. It actually sank. 15th of April, 1912, it went down. So, it took off at Queenstown in Ireland. And it was a fantastic day. It was on its way. Now, everybody in this room have heard of the Titanic. But have you heard the story of the poor iceberg? There's no movie about the iceberg. No one knows about the poor. I know what happened with the iceberg. It actually broke off Greenland 3,000 years ago. It was on its journey for 3,000 years, which is what millions and millions of icebergs were doing. I suspect the iceberg had a right to be there. The two shall meet. Now, before they left in Queenstown, the Titanic was delayed with an hour and a half because another ship's moorings broke, drifted into its path, and they had to wait, and then it took off. And the two then collided. Now, just imagine for one moment, if that Titanic had not been delayed for an hour and a half, what would have happened? Captain E.J. Smith would have been a hero. They would have broken the shipping record at the time, and it would have been fantastic. They wouldn't make a movie about it, but it was completely safe. Also, it would have missed that iceberg, of course, with about a mile, it was estimated, but no one in this room would have ever heard of a guy with the name of Leonardo DiCaprio. Leonardo would have been a two-bit actor somewhere in New York. Today, he's flying around in his own jet and lecturing business people around the world about climate change. What does he know about climate change? Hour and a half, he would have been nothing. Now he's a big boy. I have a case against this guy. I don't like him. Now, and there is the iceberg. No one ever saw that picture before. There are over 28 companies now that show Titanic-like characteristics. And I've been starting to research this and lived in Australia, Maura mine, famous mine, most advanced mine in Australia at the time, most productive, most safe mine, exploded and 15 people killed. And since then, it was my kind of like a life journey, looking at organizations that show these kind of Titanic-like characteristics. Now, which kind of organizations are they? Anybody remember which company was behind Bhopal? Union Carbide. Where is Union Carbide today? It is Dow Chemicals, the largest company in the world, chemical company in the world. It was at the time a leading organization in safety. It was at the time the DuPont of safety. And then one flange in a place, not in a place where it should have been, water escaped and a chemical reaction started and thousands of people killed. Piper Alpha, Occidental Petroleum, owns this company, 167 people killed, and 6 months before they won a safety competition as the highest rated safety organization in safety in the North Sea at the time. BP Texas Refinery, other companies benchmarked against it in Texas at the time. Deepwater Horizon, Transocean, the company that owned that rig, Deepwater Horizon, world-renowned for its obsession with safety, obsessive about safety. And they killed 7 people. The Challenger and Columbia shuttles. These are rocket scientists that knows everything. And these things blew up. DuPont themselves, the safest company in the world, had a disaster in November 2014. If the wind had been in a different direction, it could have been dozens of people killed. Something is not right. If this is what's happening to some organizations, many of them around us. In Australia, this was a company that I was a judge of on a day that they've been awarded the Minex Award. It was the most prestigious award in probably mining in the world at the time. You had been extensively analyzed by teams of experts. I was on the panel. There's the team getting the Minex Award, and 4 months later, 4 people killed in a disaster. At different hour, could have been 36. And that is the latest Titanic, the Concordia. This is what they look like in terms of size. Hundreds and hundreds of times more advanced in technology and safety. And it ran into the rocks. Now, the common characteristics of these organizations are they have focused on safety as a core value of their organizations. They approached safety through technology, systems, audits, and enforcement. They were fixated on the compliance behavior of employees. They were committed to become best in class in safety, most of them, and they were achieving decreasing accident rates, and they got nearer and nearer to zero. And this is basically well-managed organizations. My contention is that these organizations were sunk by overconfidence, by delusions. And how do these delusions evolve? Each one of those safety practices, interventions, if not looked at critically, contribute to these delusions. The first one is the myth of simplicity. Everybody has heard of the Swiss cheese model in safety. Well, the Swiss cheese model is probably a dangerous idea because it creates the illusion that, hey, it is as simple as a couple of holes in a Swiss cheese model. And safety is far more complicated than that. But this creates confidence, triangles, confidence. We have all these slogans in safety. Safety is common sense, and safety, expect the unexpected. What gets measured gets done. Humans cause 90% of complacency is the problem. And they just come and go, and we live by them. The most dangerous one, all accidents are preventable. And of course they are. But let's see if they really are. Let me shake your confidence, if I can, just with an illustration. This is a chemical plant. The chemical blue is a very corrosive chemical. And once a year, they pump that tank empty, and they pump that chemical into the other tanks, which they've lowered the production of, in order to replace all the pumps and pipes in that tank. Okay, there's a problem, potential problem. If too much of blue goes into tank number 1, and it goes over a certain ratio, it becomes explosive. They got to make sure that mix doesn't go over. So what did they do? They had 8 video monitors with 8 teams around them watching the flow rates. If any one of those teams independently notices too much of the blue chemical goes into tank number 1, they change the direction of pumping. 27 years, no problem. 28th year, no one saw that it was exceeded. It became explosive, and it triggered and exploded. 15 people killed. I'm going to let you now do what they've had to do. They simply had to add numbers up on a screen, on the video numbers, on the video screens. Very simple numbers. It's like 2 plus 2, 3 plus 3. But I'm going to ask you to do this loud as a group so we can all hear who blows them up. 15 people work there. Please be careful. All you got to do now is focus for about 30 seconds, 20 seconds, 10 seconds. Focus on the job. Don't make a mistake. Please. And afterwards, after you blew them up, I'm going to ask you, is the accident preventable? And you're all going to say yes. But I guarantee you now, you can't do it. I'll also give you an alarm. If dangerous chemical comes to 1, you'll hear an alarm. And the alarm will sound like that, okay? You can't say, I didn't try to help you as much as I can. Everybody together, take 1,000 plus 40. 1,040. Plus 1,000. Plus 30. Plus 1,000. Plus 20. Plus 1,000. Plus 10.
6,000.
You cannot add up. Answer at 4,100. How can you make such a... I asked you to pay attention. To not make a mistake. There's 15... I warned you. But you don't care. Well, we'll blow them up. Is the action preventable? If we have to do this again, you have to be incredibly stupid to blow them up again, isn't it? Well, what we've just done, we've simulated Chernobyl. The failures that happened, some part of the failures happened in Chernobyl, we've just simulated that in this room. You blew them up too. Now, if we do the analysis of the accident, let's do the 5 whys. It's like based on the Swiss cheese model, and let's do the 5 whys, okay? First why, explosive mixture in tank 1. Why? Because a critical level was exceeded. Why? Too much inflow from tank 2. Why? A control failed. Why? Human error. I did actually have here before dumb human error, but I won't do that. How do we solve this human error now? What do we train you in? Literacy and numeracy. We are deluded into that safety is simple. Oh, we'll see about humans too in a moment. But this is what I call, the second one I call the delusion of risk control. And we have these fancy charts that we have all around in safety. But then, you know, and I'm guilty of this too, in safety, what do? Our safety people look at this and say, you know what? That's not fancy enough. Let's make it a bit more fancy. Let's put a few levels in there. And then we look at this and say, no. Let's put some formulas in there. And we shove this in people's hands and we say to them, make a risk assessment and judge your risks in your environment and do. I can also prove to you, I don't have the time for it, that you cannot calculate in your mind likelihood. You cannot do it. We don't know the difference between possible, infrequent, remote, improbable in our minds. It's just impossible. Humans can't do that. And this is a chart that was used by NASA, and they had Challenger rated as an accepted control risk. It's catastrophic but improbable, and Columbia was remote and critical and acceptable risks. These are rocket scientists that had hugely inadequate assessment of risks, deluded by a quantification of something you can't quantify. And a very famous book written by Diane Vaughan said, the fateful Challenger launch decision can be attributed to redundancy-induced overconfidence. That's a long word. Redundancy-induced overconfidence. The more simple we think things are, the more quantified we think they are, the more we become overconfident and deluded. The third one is the error of human error. Now, the error of human error is probably one of the most widely spread delusions we have. Humans cause accidents. Humans are fallible. Humans fail. And it's true. I've just proved to you how you fail. Didn't I? Well, I regard this, however, as a failure of thinking, that we can attribute failures just to humans. It's far more complicated than that. Now, here is an example of human error. This is a snake handler. That is a Texas rattlesnake. It's an incredibly dangerous snake. So we have a person here, to use your words, he's made a choice to come upstage with a rattlesnake. Guy must be an idiot. Now, next to him is a TV anchor, but this guy's at the safe end of the snake because that's where the fangs are. Now, if you look at very basic human error models that we use widely in safety, and says there are 4 things that make people do mistakes. They rush, they're frustrated, they're fatigued, and they're complacent. And they all play a role. And then we say, we can have these kind of errors. Mind of the job, eyes of the task, poor grip in the line of fire. Now, you can clearly see the snake handler is doing them all. And there is no question that he's going to get that because that's where the fangs are. Look, waiting. Now watch what happens.
Texas rat snakes are going to be one of the largest snakes that you find in the Metroplex area.
Now, if you missed it, I'll show it again. There's a little lizard on a table here.
Texas rat snakes are going to be one of the largest snakes that you find in the Metroplex area.
Now, in that guy's mind, he was at the safe end of the snake. What can go wrong here? Nothing. The other guy's going to get it. Now, he got attacked by this little lizard. Okay, admittedly, it's in the groin area, and so he falls over. This is a human error. But the point is, the person had not thought anything. He did not make a choice to take a risk at all. His thinking process is completely inadvertent. That guy is intentional. And these are huge differences in human error. We do not and cannot treat them in the same way. What goes on in the human mind in terms of perception, we just had a chat with my friend there before we started, is incredibly complex. And we have very simple models to say, oh, people's mind is off the job, off the task. It's far more complicated than that too. I'll give you another example so the people there, you can't see now, so you won't make this mistake, or if it's a mistake, I don't know. Just tell me what you see on the screen now. Yell it out. What else? Why did you say spoon? It is a logical assumption, isn't it? What idiot puts a fork in a cup of coffee? Australians, yes, not in Canada. No, we don't do it here. The mistake you've made in this room now played a critical role in the Piper Alpha disaster. Here's what happened, and I'm not being melodramatic about this. Here's what happened. Piper Alpha had a fire at 10 o'clock that night. They sent out a mayday to all the rigs in the area that there's a fire in Piper Alpha. They then shut their production down, and then the other rigs heard that the fire was a mayday on the radio, and they shut production down in Piper Alpha, and then they lost radio contact. The other rigs continued producing oil. It's got nothing to do with it. They're miles away from them. They continued producing oil. However, because of the shutdown in production in Piper Alpha's pipes, there was no pressure in their pipes, and the other rigs, two of them, had been connected to the same pipeline with their production of oil. And all their oil that they produced and pumped returned to Piper Alpha and overflowed a burning rig that turned a small fire into a massive fire that heated up the gas risers. There was also production of gas on those systems, exploded. They've never thought even of that as being possible. And when they were challenged by Lord Cullen, why did you not stop production? Logically, you're pumping oil and a burning fire. Why did you not stop production? They all testified that they believed, they've assumed that Piper Alpha will get the fire under control because these rigs are fitted with highly sophisticated, powerful water deluge systems. Huge pumps under the water, the fire starts, it automatically kicks in and pumps water on every square inch of that rig. They've never failed in the past to extinguish fires on these rigs. However, on the day of the fire, before the fire, Piper Alpha was in a normal production day. They had scuba divers in the water under the rig doing repair work. And the manager of Piper Alpha was concerned. If a fire would start, what can happen? The divers can be sucked in by the pumps automatically. He ordered the pumps on manual. And that night, someone simply didn't switch it back to automatic. And they've all assumed they'll get the fire under control and they pumped oil. You've all just assumed there's a spoon in there. These are very, very complicated stuff in terms of how we see, how we understand. Simple observations around us is not that simple. It creates delusions that if we only sort out the human problem, we sort out our safety problem. There is also the cult of compliance. Now, the standard operating procedure is the lifeblood of safety. It's the holy grail of safety. We cannot operate without safety systems and procedures. There will be chaos on the roads if we do. But as we go further and further into depending on those, we fall into what is called the cult of compliance. Now, it's a bit like religion. Fundamentally, foundationally, religion is good and people live in harmony. But when it becomes a cult, people drink Kool-Aid. And that's what we may be doing in safety today And that's taking Kool-Aid as we go forward. Now let me try and explain that. If you look at the various types of behaviors, on the left we have acting safely, on the right taking risks. Top, complying to rules, bottom, breaking rules. Now if you look at those 4 quadrants, they all mean different things in terms of human behavior. If you look at the quadrant here, complying to rules and acting safely, and you look at traffic behavior, what will you see? You'll see people driving at or under the speed limit. You'll see pedestrians cross at pedestrian crossings. That's where we want people to be. But in traffic science, this is called the 85th percentile. Why? Because the majority of accidents actually happen in that quadrant. Most road accidents happen at or under the speed limits. Most pedestrians are killed at the crosswalks. Why? Well, it's a natural statistic. In the first instance, most driving happens at or under the speed limit. Most pedestrians cross at crosswalks. So if you really want to kill a pedestrian, where will you find them? At the crosswalks. But there is an additional reason. When it becomes a cult, when that compliance becomes cult-like, and the behavior looks like this. Now, you've all been pedestrians yourself. We've all been pedestrians. Just do yourself a little favor from now on, and I've become obsessed with this now, and I have to stop doing this because it irritates my wife. That if people cross in front of me, if I stop at a traffic light, watch their behavior. Look what they're doing. Increasingly, people are obviously also on cell phones texting. I was in Los Angeles a few months ago, and I'm stopping at a turn into a hotel, and there's an arrow that stops me from turning over across a red arrow, can't turn. But the green light is still for through traffic on. A lady, because I stopped with a baby carriage, what do you call it, baby carriage, yeah, and a little toddler next to her starts walking because she thought I stopped, and she starts walking. And she's on her cell phone texting or reading as she goes. And I'm watching a car coming in my rear view mirror when she's in front of me. And at that moment, I had an incredible dilemma. What do? I can see the car coming. If I put my hand on that hooter and honked at her, what can she do? This is all in a split second. What can she do? She may think that I'm coming and she lurch out in front of me, away from me, and she would be right in front of that car. And I just sat there, ice cold, and watch how that car came past her and missed her with 2 or 3 feet. Can you imagine what that would have looked like? A child and a baby and a woman killed right there. Why? Because of the cult of compliance. We are in the most regulated, most protected, most fail-safe system ever. And as a result of that, we are becoming deluded by our compliance. The Piper Alpha disaster, 167 men, knowing there's a fire, seeing the smoke around the accommodation block, blindly followed the rule of evacuation, just like we now know that's our evacuation escape routes. Theirs was you go to the accommodation block, because on top of that's the helicopter pads. That's where the evacuation will be from. They all walked there, and that's where they all died. A young man who was working on the rig, and I listened to his presentation in the United Kingdom, working on the rig, said when he looked up, he saw the smoke and flames bellowing around the accommodation block. This guy was a helicopter piloted guy. He had a helicopter pilot's license. And his brother, who organized the job for him on this rig, was a supervisor. He ran up to talk to his brother and said, we must get off the rig, we must jump into the sea, because I know, as a helicopter pilot, I will never land a helicopter on a burning oil rig. It will not happen. They will not do it. Let's jump in the sea. His brother said to him, no, we must go into the accommodation block. He said, we argued, we couldn't agree. And eventually, we went different ways. I kissed him, and the last time I saw him is he was running up the stairs into the flames and smoke. And I turned around, And as I was making my way back to the drilling derrick on the other side, I encountered dozens of people on their way, running to the accommodation block, and I tried to stop them. I tried to convince them. They wouldn't. 10 others came with him. 11 people jumped into the sea. 15 others fell into the sea. A huge no-no. Ice cold waters. But that was the only small chance of survival. What did the others do? They stopped thinking, stopped judging risk, seeing risk, because they blindly got to go to the accommodation block. Of course, there is nothing wrong with compliance. We have to have compliance. It's foundational. One of the great shuttle pilots, Bob Coe, said this very famously: the quickest way to get you killed on a manned space flight is to not follow the standard operating procedure. The quickest way is to not follow it. And he said, the second quickest way to get you killed is to always follow the standard operating procedure. Are we losing the capability of the glory days, as Rob mentioned, that of when we had many more accidents and more deaths and so on. But we also had people who understood risks, and for different reasons were exposed to those. Are we losing that foundational skill, the capability to respond to risk? Humans are still the smartest risk management system you have. The competence of people is what we're losing, and it becomes part of the cult of compliance. There is the fifth one, the paralysis of protection. Now, the paralysis of protection is probably built into a little story about the French knights. How did the French knights came to be? In the 1400s, 1300s, medieval times, the French and the English were having a big fight. They were in a war that lasted 100 years. Can you imagine that? 100 years. Surely somebody should have figured out, hey, this is going on too long. Let's stop this thing. But they didn't. And they kept on fighting, battle after battle. But the French came up with the first military tactic. They said, hey, we're going to send horsemen into the battlefield on horseback with long sticks and knock the English guys off their feet. Well, it sounded a great idea, but in the first fight, they just knocked everybody off their feet because they didn't know who's French and who's English. So the French said, no, we're going to dress in blue now. Started military uniforms. So the next fight, the French win because they just blast these guys off their feet and the French soldiers overcome them. So the English came up, how can we prevent them from coming into the battlefield, these horsemen? So they had small bands of archers running around the battlefield, shooting them if they see them, attacking them. And so they can't get into the battlefield. So this had the English getting the upper hand again. So the French said, okay, how can we stop these guys shooting us with these arrows? So they came up with a brilliant idea. You know, one guy, he was the HR manager for the French. So that's start of HR. And he said, oh, I've got a guy here with a great idea. He said, we must wear leather protection on the horsemen. So they dressed these guys up in leather. They tested it out, the first one. It didn't work. Arrow went straight through. But they made him Employee of the Month. And they put double layers of leather, and that protected them. And in the next fight, the arrows couldn't get through, the French won. So what does the English now? What do they now do? So they talk to their HR guys, and the HR guys say, oh, we've got suggestion boxes out there. So they look at suggestion boxes. One guy had a brilliant invention. It's a steel tip arrow, sharp steel tip, and they tested it out with a longbow, shoot straight through the leather. New arrows, new weapon. English win now. So the French next protection is what? Metal, yes. So they dressed these guys up in metal. And they were all covered head to toe in metal armor. And on the day they were getting to the battlefield, they couldn't get on the horses. Oh, they can't walk. They can't walk. And so they help each other up. And eventually the guys sit on the horses, all protected, and there they go. And the English guys started shooting at them with their sharp arrows. It flies off. So what did the commander say to the archers? Shoot the horses! Yes! So they started shooting the horses. Horses threw these guys off, and they fell on the ground, couldn't get up. English won the battle. Battle of Agincourt. What was the root cause of the French demise? They were paralyzed by their protection. And this is when the cult of compliance combines with technology and we become paralyzed. And we have all these beautiful, fanciful charts, hierarchies of controls, and they're all great. And they're all great. But here's an example of paralysis. So we have to apply the hierarchy of control. So what are we going to do next? We have to engineer this out. People are doing dumb things. So what's the next level of engineering control we can put in here? There you go. The two engineers right in front. Have booms right across and on the other side so that they can't do this, which is exactly what they've done in the situation that brings out around more protection. I was part of a group in Australia at the time. It's about 10 years ago now. We were given the opportunity to put technology into place and to show you what happens when people become dependent on engineering controls. This is a road building crew. So one of the road builders, they call them broomers, were killed by a multi-roller. So they came to us and said, can you fit a proximity alert system on this? Which we did. And we had this whole team in Brisbane, Australia, for about a year while they're building a tunnel to our disposal. So we put transmitters into the reflector vests, and we put a receiver on the roller with an alarm. And it made a sound that went like ch-ch-ch-ch-ch-ch-ch. And the Aussie guys, they called it the chook. They loved it. Because as they get closer to the roller, the alarm goes off. We had it perfected eventually, and we called the company in to come and have a look. The guy and the CEO came in, they looked at this, and they said, this is fantastic. You can start building. We are buying. I said, how many you want? He said, well, we have at least 100 different crews out there. And they were a small company doing road building. There's huge companies out there. I thought, my goodness, I'm going to be filthy rich. I'm going to buy my own island after this. This is the end of life for me, as I know it, hard working. This is good times coming. And I'm starting to make plans. And one morning, I'm sitting in my office, and I'm paging through the project file that I was maintaining over this year. And there's a lot of sketches I made. As a psychologist, I enjoy, looking at people's behaviors. I made sketches of people's behaviors, where they were. And my eye caught a sketch I had made before the proximity alert system was installed. And what happened? The workers were about 6-7 meters away from a roller, and they're brooming the bitumen in front of the roller. As it approached, they move forward, They keep an eye on it, but that's how somebody got killed. Then my eye caught another sketch right next to it, where they had the proximity alert systems installed, and where were they positioned. And I realized they were at the detection zone, 2-3 meters away. But most scaringly, no one's looking back anymore. What have I done? I have paralyzed them with this protection. They've lost that innate capability to constantly just, with a sixth sense, just looking at things and react and respond. They don't have to anymore. One day, that signal alarm doesn't go off. Who killed them? When I spoke with my lawyer, who are they going to sue? What did the lawyer say? You. I pulled the plug on this whole idea. And I knew, when I did this, there's millions flying out my window. Today, proximity alert systems are just everywhere. Now again, there is nothing wrong with it. Technology is the way of the future. Absolutely. But as we take the human out of that technology, just like you were saying earlier on about the Ferrari guy who was standing and watching with the sensors not working, we can bring humans back into play, and we should, because they are the most potent system out there. It is a matter of engineering versus psychology. The engineers are streaking ahead with their capabilities, their technologies. But we in safety, we are still applying a psychology called behavioral psychology that is 30, 40 years outdated. Behavioral psychology does not account for the complex environments in which people find themselves today. Complex perceptions, delusions, and dependencies on systems. Behavioral safety increases that. And it's leading us down a path that could be taking us down a Titanic path. Measure safety performance. And here I talk about what I call the trap of targets. Nothing in safety has been so powerful in establishing the idea of zero accidents. Nothing has been powerful as that in order to get people focused, change thinking, and it has been making a tremendous influence on safety. But just like everything else in safety that I spoke of so far, if it becomes too much, if it becomes cult-like, it creates behaviors and responses that we are not prepared for. When Captain E.J. Smith took charge of the Titanic, he had this goal to break this shipping record. Do you think he had a target of having any accidents along the way? No, it was zero accidents. That's going to get me there. It is perfectly sound as such. But that's what created a delusion. Now, it creates what I call the safe trap. And the safe trap is the following. How do you know, everybody in the room here, how do you know that you traveled safely to this venue today? How do you know that? Because we are here. This is the measurement that you have about safety. This is the measurement we have in organizations about safety. We are here. No one's injured. But is zero safe? You may have traveled through, and on my way here, I took this picture of somebody coming here in a black car. Now, I'm not going to ask you to put your hand up, because then you're going to be immediately guilty. Now, there you are. You are coming. No, this is not Kamloops, okay. But you could have traveled through an intersection like this. Now, just look what happened moments after this person left that intersection. Watch the car and watch this lane. Just watch this lane, and you'll see what happens. Now, if you freeze that moment there, there's probably just that car and that car that even knows what happened here. He didn't touch anybody. He went straight through. In slow motion, look, that car and that car, that guy doesn't even know what happened. This guy, maybe no. This is why zero cannot be judged as safe. And you know this is happening in your organization. We have lots of near misses. And if we don't have near misses, we're still not safe, because we may have what we call far misses. The black car that left and is now 200-300 yards down the road, for that person, it was a far miss. All the conditions were there for a near miss or an accident. That person has just been a split second away from it. And if we focus on these numbers and these slogans around measurement in safety, we are deluded that we're in the right direction. Safety is going well. If you have a look at typical major slogans in safety, injury-free, accident-free, harm-free, they've achieved that. If we say, arrive alive, we've achieved that. Nobody gets hurt. Exxon's famous slogan, nobody gets hurt. They've achieved that too. And my favorite, everybody goes home in the same way they came to work. They've achieved that too. Now, an Australian guy had me thinking about this in a different way one day. When I was sitting in a room and the CEO was talking to the workers, and he says, I am committed that every employee goes home in the same way they come to work. And there's one guy at the back says, "What? Drunk?" Now, he was making a joke, but he was actually saying something very important. We cannot use that as a measure of how well we do in safety, because people could have gone through this kind of risk exposure, and we regard that as safe because we achieve the goals. We are deluded by triangles and numbers in safety. And this is probably one of the greatest delusions we've ever suffered in safety. And I'm guilty of this. We have professed to the engineers and the operational people out there, all you got to do is focus on the 600 small accidents, and that will go the risks. They'll take the risk for the serious one away. And we've been deluded by that, which it means that 600 deck chair accidents on the Titanic, if they eliminated all that, they would have also eliminated their hitting an iceberg. It's not linked. There is no logical link between these things. What we do in small accidents got nothing to do about serious accidents. They are different things. We need different technologies, different focuses on those two things. And if you have a look at the BP Texas refinery, this is an excerpt out of the Baker report that shows here how good BP was. They've had year-on-year improvements. They were the best in their industry. They were deluded by the fact that they are doing well in safety. And then 15 people killed, 170 injured. We are so focused on the small things that we don't see the big ones coming anymore, because all the resources going into analyzing cuts and bruises and slips and trips and ankles, and none of those things are going to change your business materially, but this will. Albert Einstein also famously said, "Not everything that can be counted counts. Not everything that counts can be counted." Now in safety, this is for me incredibly important. We count wrong things, and the things that we should count, we're not counting. And we are giving ourselves the nice pat on the back that things are going well. Well, it wasn't Albert Einstein that said it. It's claimed that he did, but he never said that. It was actually a guy with the name of William Cameron. Now, if I said to you, William Cameron said, would you have been impressed? No. So let's stick, it's Albert Einstein. The last one is one of the most dangerous ones. Rewarding achievements. Nothing in this world influences human behavior as powerfully as incentives and rewards for achievements. That's how we operate in all respects. In safety, they have become deceptions of pretension, and leads to what I call the delusion of invulnerability. And if you have a look at these awards, it's no more dramatically shown than on the Transocean oil rig that killed 7 people and spilled millions of liters of oil into the Gulf of Mexico. Just listen carefully, if I can get maybe a bit of volume.
The tension in every drilling operation is between doing things safely and doing them fast. Time is money, and this job was costing BP $1 million a day. The day of the accident, BP flew several managers to the Deepwater Horizon for a ceremony to congratulate the crew for 7 years without an injury. For 7 years without an injury. 7 years without an injury. For 7 years without an injury.
I put this loop in. Who in this room believes that they've worked on an oil rig for 7 years, highly risky activities, and no one had a scratch on them? It is fake news. There, I've coined a new term, hey? Fake news. It's fudged. It's nonsense. And yet, BP was on the rig, giving them an award. How could BP executives not know that this is fudged and nonsense? How could they have not? Of course they knew. Here's what happens today in this world. People pretend to be safe, and we pretend to believe them. And this is a game. And this game is incredibly treacherous. I analyzed, personally, 3 fatal accidents for a large North American construction company. And at the end of the year, they invited me to the party, and they gave me the annual magazine, front page, another year fatal-free. And I challenged the big boss and said, this is obviously not true. And he says, technically it is. We've checked with the lawyers. I said, I'm going to expose this. He says, you can try, you'll never work in town again. Well, I haven't exposed them because I'm still working in town. But here's what they've done. I can't name them. Here's what they've done. Fatal accident would happen in Dubai. That's where I analyzed them. 3 of them. They would charter a jet in Europe under a different name. They fly to Dubai, pick up a body, and deliver that body into Bangladesh or Sri Lanka, where the workers are from, subcontractors, and they report deaths in those countries. Here, they were fatal-free. This is what's happening today. I tell the story to an Australian company, construction company, and the guy said to me, I want to tell you something. I'm building a gas plant for a large North American company here. One of our workers fell off, broke his femur, serious injury in accident. I reported to the project manager, and he hit the roof and said, you take that off the stats, because Houston is a zero accident company. You and I will not have a job if we report that. Now, if I say Houston, I'm talking about one of the big oil and gas companies. This is happening today. This is the delusion of invincibility, the pretension that's being created in businesses. The focus on safety is so enormous, and that's good. That increasingly, the person at the front end of the business knows I cannot report things if I can possibly hide it. If there's a near miss or a risk or whatever, you just keep your mouth shut. It happens at the smartest, most advanced organizations today. And that is probably the most dangerous situation we're finding ourselves in. What gets measured gets done. It's an age-old saying. In safety, I say what gets measured gets manipulated. And no more dramatic than the Westray coal mine, Canadian coal mine, 26 people killed, 1992, receiving the John T. Ryan Safety Award, and here in the Gazette, Montreal, Tuesday, 1998, exposed how they fudged their safety numbers. And they rescinded the John T. Ryan Safety Award after this came out. This is probably the biggest wall we're hitting, because we lose the capability to openly talk and identify and see risks in our workplaces because we are increasingly shutting people down. This is the most dangerous workplace in the world, the American aircraft carriers. Now, if you look at what they can do, one American aircraft carrier, the firepower is equivalent to 50% of the world's military forces together. One. America's got 12. What is an aircraft carrier? Well, below the deck is Navy safety management systems. Above the deck is aviation safety systems, the things we know. But on the deck is a completely different culture and a completely different approach. Now, this aircraft carrier has taken the Atlanta airport, the busiest airport in the world, and shrunk it to 2 football fields. They put that on top of massive warehouses, missiles, food, on top of 2 nuclear plants, aircraft hanging with 90 jets, living quarters for 5,000 people. They sail at sea at 30 knots, and they land jets at 160 miles an hour every 42 seconds on them, while jets are taking off on that deck. And this is what it looks like. They have to catch this arresting cable every 42 seconds. This happens. While on the other side, every 20 seconds, planes are taking off. Incredible that they don't have accidents 10, 20 times a day. And they seldom have them. Why? Well, sometimes things do go wrong. And this is what it looks like when it does go wrong.
As this single-seat FA-18 Hornet traps, the arresting cable stretches to the breaking point. When it breaks, the plane quickly disappears over the side and into the water. saves the pilot, who ejects immediately. This yellow shirt miraculously jumps the cable as it whips under him, not once, but twice.
That guy jumping is not luck. That guy jumping is the consequence of decades and decades of training and focus and on investing in the people on that deck. They get the best training, they are in teams, they look after each other. The culture there is incredible. And it's no more different, more sophisticated than the culture and the circumstance you find in a logging environment, falling environment. It's the same kind of dynamics that happen. What makes them ready? Well, here's an example of what makes them ready. One of my employees was working as a shooter on this deck. And he said, one day somebody dropped a tool, and that tool was missing. And they looked for it for 45 minutes while the jets are flying. They can't land until that tool is found. And when they found it, huge relief and the jets came in. That night, the air boss walked into the mess, 5,000 soldiers sitting there. And he's the biggest boss that you can imagine. And everybody goes quiet, and he calls this guy up who lost that tool. And he walked to the stage, and he said to this young man, I want to thank you for what you've done today. What did he do? He gave that guy the most incredible power. And he gave everybody in that room, in that mess, the most incredible power. We do not hide mistakes. We talk openly, and I'll commend you for that. And that is why on these decks, their definition of safety is not the absence of accidents. It is the readiness to respond to risks, to resilience. And they can all be measured. If you change your definition to readiness to respond to risk, you'll change everything in your business into a powerful, proactive way of doing business. All these myths and problems and delusions I have explained here today, they have a different focus if we look into the future. The myth of simplicity, if we manage the complexity of exposure, we understand safety is complex. If we focus on dynamic, random systems in the workplace, lean systems. If we focus on people as our strongest link in the safety chain, not the weakest. If we give autonomy at the sharp end and not take it away by letting people always only comply in cults, we create invisible safety. There isn't a safety officer on that deck running around with charts and things in his pocket. They are all built into what they do. They do not have absence of accidents. They have readiness to respond to risk. And most importantly, they create openness and honesty about risk. This is the way of the future, I'm convinced. And I hope that you've taken something from this today and that you can apply that in your world. That was my story. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Corrie. Are there any questions out there? Do you have a question, Corrie? I don't know if I was actually officially asked to ask for questions or any responses, but I've just sat through, I think, probably the best safety presentation I've ever sat through. Yeah.